Imagine an endless room filled with thousands of glowing purple tubes. Inside these tubes, thousands of Sylvias float with their eyes open. They call their own names in unison, Sylvia, Sylvia. Their voices grow louder and more desperate, like an army of trapped ghosts. Suddenly, a scream. Deirdre jolted awake, sweat drenching her face. "Sylvia!" she shouted, her body shaking violently. "Sylvia's moods are getting worse," she muttered, holding back her sobs. Her friend beside her tried to calm her down. "Deirdre, slow down. She'll wake up." But Deirdre didn't care. In her head, the call still echoed, thousands of voices. One name. In the messy teenager's room, her mother whispered anxiously to Steve, "She can sleep even if a tornado passes by." "But haven't you noticed how drastically she's changed?" Steve said it was just a phase of adolescence. His mother immediately retorted, "This isn't normal adolescence." Suddenly, Sylvia appeared at the door. Her pointed ears were visible and her voice was cold. "You don't know that it's not—" She approached, startling her parents. "Sylvia, dear?" Finally, she woke up completely, grabbed her clothes and muttered, "Yeah, I'm awake. Don't nag me. I don't want to be late and I don't want to be moody anymore." Her face was cold and her eyes were sharp. Something had changed, and that night felt darker than usual. It was a normal morning in the suburbs. Mom waved cheerfully from the door. "Bye, sweetie." Christy and Jenna passed by, greeting each other casually. But Soldier looked really gloomy as the three of them walked together. "Cheer up, little soldier," Christy asked. "Why so glum? You look even less happy than usual." Soldier just muttered, "Nothing. Life, I guess." Jenna and Christy looked at each other, and then Christy said firmly, "Jenna and I will help you take on whatever life throws at you, okay?" The soldier nodded slowly, but in the white van parked nearby, the radio crackled. "Central, this is Surveillance 3. That morning turned out to be no ordinary morning. Someone was watching. Soldier knew more than he was letting on. In the cracked conference room, a cold voice announced, "We have the target." The woman on the podium continued, "If there are no further questions." The red-haired man in the corner muttered, "Good, whisper. Monitor the subject without him knowing." He rubbed his tired forehead and said, "I'll report to Dr. Carver." Suddenly, a woman in orange followed him into the corridor. "Sorry to interrupt, Doctor," she began, but was cut off rudely. "Save it for the elevator." Inside the broken elevator, the doors closed slowly. "Okay, Warren, continue." The atmosphere was tense. Cracks were everywhere, and a big secret was quietly moving behind the crumbling walls. The surveillance team reported, "One of the subjects has been found in Moser, a suburb of upstate New York." Warren was immediately enthusiastic. "Excellent! Keep monitoring from a distance. Don't make contact. Wait for orders." Dr. Carver entered, smiling broadly. "Oh, this is very interesting." In the underground control room, filled with purple monitors and mysterious tubes, Warren muttered, "We can finally move on to the next phase of the program." They all knew. The girls were no longer just targets. They were the key to something much bigger. On the school hockey field, Miss Mark called, "Sylvia, it's your turn." Sylvia jumped the vault, but her movements were different, wild, and almost falling. "Why, F." She was safe, but Miss Mark gently reprimanded her, saying, "Good, but next time follow the others, okay?" Sylvia replied, "Okay, sorry." Her friend handed her a towel. Suddenly, Kyle appeared. "Hi, thanks," she said. Sylvia replied stiffly, "Hi." Kyle was really awkward. "Well, I'll be going now." He backed away slowly while Sylvia and her friends looked at each other. Something was strange and everyone knew it. Kyle approached Sylvia awkwardly, saying he liked her flip. However, he was so awkward that Sylvia sarcastically replied, "Right." Kyle ran away quickly. In the hallway, her friend gave her a stern warning. "Stay away from Kyle. He's a troubled girl's boyfriend. I'm only saying this once." Sylvia was silent, her gaze cold. She knew this wasn't just a normal relationship, but something much darker. At dusk on the side of the road, Sylvia laughed as she recounted, "Colleen said, Back off, Brainiac, or we'll give you the man dance. Her friend protested. No way. Sylvia was relaxed. It's true, but it was easier than I thought. Suddenly, Colleen appeared from the darkness. She shouted, Sylvia Mark, you're disgusting. Then, she jumped onto the roof of the van and laughed loudly. The three of them could only stare. Someone was playing around, but the atmosphere felt strange. It was a dark night, and the Sampson brothers' van lurked silently. Colleen was restless in bed. Suddenly, Sylvia stood in a pool of red surrounded by purple-robed figures whispering, Join us, Sylvia. Sylvia backed away in fear. This isn't water. They approached, their voices echoing, Join us. Sylvia realized, of course, it's blood. Colleen woke up screaming, Ah! Her face was pale. It was no ordinary dream. Something was calling to Sylvia, and Colleen could feel it too. Colleen woke up on the floor of her room, terrified, gasping for breath. Large eyes watched her from the darkness. She curled up and muttered, He has to stop dreaming like this. In the lab that night, Dr. Carver was still in front of the computer, his eyes tired. Warren entered and asked, Still up? Carver replied briefly, Can't sleep. Nightmares. The atmosphere was cold, the nightmares felt real, and the night was not over yet. In the dark lab, Edgar almost touched one of the tubes, but Carver stopped him immediately. No. Edgar said he just wanted to look. Carver asked coldly, Do you know what this one does? The figure in the tube floated. Carver explained, It flies, sees ultraviolet light, and photosynthesizes. It doesn't need to eat. His voice grew tense. We have to find them, bring them back, and activate them. Then he fell silent, staring at the screen. If they start appearing in the world, I don't know what kind of damage will happen. In the school locker hallway, a guy in a red jacket greeted Colleen rudely. Hey, monkey girl, he said. Colleen immediately replied, What did you just call me? When he said that she had been twirling yesterday, she replied proudly, I'm the best twirler. The guy asked her age. You're really only 13? Colleen was relaxed and said, Yes, why? Suddenly, the guy said that Colleen was out of town and then got really angry. You're a little bitch! Colleen fights back and is pushed down while screaming, Ah! The situation immediately becomes heated and dangerous. Colleen screams for the guy to stop, but immediately attacks him while yelling at Sylvia, I told you to stay away from him! Sylvia was pushed into a locker, her nose bleeding. She was furious. She fought back hard, pushing him back until he bounced off. The locker hallway became chaotic with everyone gasping for breath. Sylvia fell face down in the hallway, blood dripping from her nose. Colleen immediately attacked again, shouting, I'll kill you! Sylvia fought back weakly. Let go, please! Colleen raised her hand high, but suddenly there was a loud snap. Colleen screamed in pain. Sylvia got up slowly, her gaze turning cold. The crowd fell silent and the atmosphere became tense. As the commotion subsided, Colleen hugged Sylvia and apologized repeatedly. Kyle stepped forward to help, but Colleen pushed him away. Get out of the way, Kyle yelled back. Colleen called Sylvia a little freak. Sylvia just sat there weakly, muttering softly, I just want her to let go of me. In the principal's office, Sylvia sat silently. The principal said her emotional outburst was unacceptable. Deirdre immediately confided, We don't like her anymore. Maybe we never really knew her. Steve protested, but Deirdre continued talking about biological parents and the possibility of hereditary madness. The principal suggested that Sylvia take a leave of absence for evaluation. Deirdre quickly agreed. Finally, Steve asked her to go home. Come on, Sylvia. Sylvia just replied coldly, Fine. The atmosphere was heavy. The family felt broken. The car slowly drove home. Sylvia sat in the back seat staring silently out the window. Deirdre tried to call out to her. Steve sat tensely in silence. The car stopped in front of the house. Sylvia immediately got out. Deirdre shouted, Sylvia, wait a minute! Steve softly muttered her name. In the living room, Steve asked Sylvia coldly why she was leaving. Deirdre demanded an explanation. Sylvia responded sharply about her age and body size. Deirdre blurted out that she sometimes regretted adopting her. Sylvia immediately became furious, shouting, "I heard you tell Mrs. Ibrahim that I'm crazy." Steve tried to calm Deirdre down, while Sylvia ran up the stairs shouting, "You're the crazy ones!" Deirdre said they would go upstairs later to talk. Sylvia immediately replied, "Then I'm not staying." She went into her room, grabbed her important belongings, money, a flashlight and photos, and jumped out the window into the dark night. The surveillance team in the dark van panicked when they saw Sylvia jump from roof to roof. "Why don't we just rush her?" asked one. "Look at her," snapped another. They confirmed visually, "That's her." But the order was firm. "Don't rush. Whisper. Report to GSI SITREP now." Sylvia continued to move in the darkness while they could only watch from afar. The surveillance team panicked and reported, "Subject 97 is beginning to manifest." Carver was pleased. That was the last one. Whisper confirmed that she was sneaking out of the house and that her parents were unaware. The order was firm. Let her escape the environment, then capture and monitor her continuously. The van moved slowly in the darkness. "Okay, ladies, we're taking her now." Natty was lost in a dark alley, completely confused. She thought, "I might as well get kidnapped so the story will be more exciting." She stood in the middle of the road and watched the white Sampson Brothers van pass by, while silently praying, "Come on, kidnap me." Suddenly, the van braked. Screech! Natty's crazy adventure began right there. Natty was standing in the dark alley when the white van suddenly braked. The door opened and 3 men in neat black suits got out. "Stay where you are, Miss Mark," they said. Natty panicked. "What is this?" They approached slowly. One of them held a syringe. "We don't want to hurt you," they said reassuringly. But the one in front said coldly, "Everything will be fine if you obey." "We won't hurt you, Sylvia. We're practically your family." Natty could only stare, her heart pounding. Natty was held tightly by 2 people. The boss said, "Hold her tight. She's being hypnotized with pleasant memories. She won't fight back." They wanted to inject her while casually talking. "Hurry up so we can go home and watch The Sopranos." But suddenly, bam! The boss's head was hit hard, and blood spurted everywhere. He collapsed, muttering, "I hope someone recorded it for you." Natty started to get up, and everything changed drastically. The battered boss said, "You're going to miss tonight's show." But Whisper was already furious and started beating everyone up with his glowing blue hands. He kicked the boss's head until it was crushed, blood splattering everywhere. Warren panicked. "Whisper is unconscious. Someone is controlling him," Natty yelled. "Get away from him." Finally, Whisper broke through the van door, pushed all the enemies away, and the boss collapsed and died. Everything became chaotic and filled with blue flames. Agents were protecting Natty when Whisper appeared and said coldly, "You just made your last mistake." Suddenly, Natty's power exploded, and burning yellow energy burst out. The agents were thrown and burned. Natty floated in the air with blood dripping from her eyes. She screamed, "Oh, why did you do this?" while enduring the pain. Amidst all the chaos, she seemed to have completely lost control. Whisper finally regained consciousness, hugged Natty, and said, "Calm down, it's me." They immediately fled the chaotic scene before reinforcements arrived. Meanwhile, at headquarters, Dr. Carver panicked when he heard the report. Whisper was back in control, Push was dead, and Heat was in critical condition and needed to go to the hospital. Everything was in disarray, and the situation was getting worse. Carver suspects the attacker is Catalyst. Whisper is sure it's one of their own men. He refuses to send more victims, but finally orders Lycan units to be sent under Whisper's supervision. They can pacify if necessary, but the victims must be alive. Finally, he ordered a replacement to link with Whisper and muttered, "Release the hounds," with a devastated look on his face. Natty asked where they were going. Whisper said they were going to hide in a secret place. Natty was suspicious. "Who are we?" Whisper replied, "You look so much like me, it gives me goosebumps." Natty asked an even scarier question. Whisper said, "We're not alone." Whisper felt that something was strange and asked Natty if it was okay to talk about it. Natty pretended it was okay, and they walked along talking. Whisper asked Natty if she felt different from other kids, like she didn't fit in. Natty said yes. She could sense people from far away and see that Whisper was stronger and more agile. Whisper admitted that maybe she was different. Finally, they hurried to their hiding place and waited for everything to calm down. Natty and Whisper were running away when they entered an alley and were immediately greeted by a group of large werewolves in chains wearing orange BSI jackets. The werewolves were escorted by people carrying electric weapons. They growled ferociously, their yellow eyes glowing. They were completely trapped. Natty could only stare blankly. Then she whispered softly, "Oh?" Whisper pulled Natty away in a hurry, but suddenly, a large werewolf grabbed Whisper, threw him hard, and seriously injured him. Natty screamed, "No!" Then, she went berserk. She jumped on the monster, broke his chains, and beat him to a pulp. At headquarters, they realized the situation had changed drastically. A pack of werewolves attacked from all directions, furious. Natty ran while being attacked but fought back, jumping on the back of a huge monster. She broke its chains and beat it mercilessly while screaming angrily. It was total chaos with Natty in a violent rage. The headquarters panicked because Whisper's feed was chaotic. In the field, Whisper was seriously injured. Natty fought fiercely against a giant werewolf. The chain broke and blood spattered everywhere. The boss said, "Run now if you can." But Natty replied coldly, "You shouldn't have come back." She stood ready to fight again as the enemy approached. The headquarters is in a panic. One of the girls killed the hounds and is now chasing Whisper. Natty is furious and beats the agent to a pulp. The agent begged for mercy, saying he had important information, but Natty unleashed her red energy immediately, saying, "Too late!" The agent collapses. The agent at headquarters panics when one of the girls shoots the agent in the head. Whisper and Natty quickly flee the chaotic location. The boss orders Mr. Chase to be pulled from the field, then calls Bellows. He collapses, deeply regretful. "What have I done?" Natty and Whisper escape into an old warehouse. Whisper is seriously injured and apologizes while hugging Natty. Natty panics and wants to go to the hospital, but Whisper says, "It's okay, I'm just cold," and takes a blanket. She washes the blood off her hands and says, "I still want to work later." The situation is tense and full of blood and worry. Whisper asks Natty if she's okay. Natty says she's still cold. Whisper covers her tightly with the blanket and whispers, "Sylvia, get ready. Something big is coming. I can feel it." Natty replied firmly, "I'm ready." They curled up together in the blanket and waited tensely. The boss was furious at Carver. 2 children were dead, 2 were hospitalized, 3 hounds were killed, and the girls had escaped. Carver tried to defend himself, saying he had limited resources, but the boss said this was the biggest failure yet, and the PR would collapse if it leaked. The atmosphere was tense. Carver was silent. The boss said the board had to be informed, but the government's secrets had to be kept. Tabitha was told to convince the board to continue the project, and Peter Chase was pulled out of Vienna. The boss admitted that Tabitha was right about one thing that night, then left. Whisper checked to see if Natty was awake. Suddenly, Natty screamed hysterically, and her body convulsed. Shocked, Whisper fell, then calmed Natty down, saying, "Calm down, it's me." Natty asked, confused, "Where are you?" Whisper replied coldly, "I'm inside you," her eyes glowing green. Natty asked how this was possible. Whisper said that she was really inside Natty's body. Natty became much stronger and was able to sense the other girls more clearly. They agreed that they had to find the others, and Whisper promised to help fight whatever came their way. They held each other tightly under the blanket, ready to face the next danger. Peter Chase entered the control room and was greeted by Tabitha. He said he couldn't wait to start hunting and bring home the escaped girls. The atmosphere was tense as they prepared to continue the operation. Whisper told of a strange dream in which he was standing on a long road lined with people's heads. Bellows' head was closest to him. He woke up scared but said maybe it wasn't a nightmare. Whisper said the dream was a good sign and that the plan would go smoothly. The road is open. Enemies like Bellows will either step aside or be buried. He hugged Natty tightly and whispered, "Wake up quickly. We have to work. Natty was unsure about the direction of the bus and asked Whisper if he was sure. Whisper calmed her down while holding the map. Natty was worried that talking loudly would attract attention, so she asked to get off right away in the middle of a quiet road. Natty was unsure about the direction of the bus, but Whisper said she was sure. Natty couldn't see for herself. Whisper explained, "Imagine a map of the U.S. You are a super bright spot in California. The others are just small dots. The brightness makes it hard to see clearly, maybe a group of other girls or something even bigger." Natty was unsure about the direction they were going and was afraid of making a mistake. Whisper was confident because Natty's light guided her to Natty. Natty said that if she was wrong, she would be very angry. Finally, Natty asked, "What is this?" while staring at something in front of her. Natty and Whisper arrived in front of the haunted Turnersville Mental Hospital. Natty immediately said, "Oh shit." Inside, 2 officers saw a blonde female patient whose condition was worsening. One officer said, "She doesn't look any better at all." The officers said that violent patients usually calm down after Thorazine. Carla has been completely silent for a week. They plan to move her to minimum security without restraints because she doesn't appear likely to rage again. The boss was angry with Tabitha, blaming her for the girl's escape and the current chaos. Tabitha defended herself, but the boss reminded her that she was the one who hired the staff and recommended the recruits. Tabitha remained silent as the boss accepted Mark's case file while remaining cold. The boss asked Tabitha, as a friend, what the plan was. Tabitha says she has kept it a secret from the government, but the council has issued an ultimatum. The girls must return within a week, or the project will be taken away. Tabitha is sure the boss is fighting for her. The boss promises to sacrifice anything. Natty suggests pretending to be the patient's sister, but realizes she doesn't know her name. They were confused, so they just sat there waiting for ideas. Natty joked about going in brutally, like the Wild Bunch. The officers were surprised to see them when suddenly a little girl appeared and hugged Natty, saying, "Hello, beautiful." The officers entered the patient's room, wanting to remove the restraints while teasing him. Suddenly, the patient went berserk, jumped on them, and beat them up. The staff collapsed and screamed for security in room 209. Natty ran quickly down the mental hospital corridor, kicked the security guard, jumped over the table, and beat up anyone who got in her way. The staff shouted, "Hey!" But Natty beat them up until they collapsed on the stairs, asking, "Which stairs?" Then, she continued running upstairs. Natty went berserk in the patient's room, beating up the staff, throwing them against the wall, hitting them with sticks until they cracked, and kicking them hard. The officers tried to put a straitjacket on her, but she fought back against both of them and blood splattered everywhere. Natty was surrounded by officers. She fought back fiercely, beating them one by one, breaking bones and kicking hard. Blood spurted everywhere. The officers screamed for help and collapsed in a heap. Natty stood over them while other officers panicked, looking for her. Natty was surrounded by officers. She fought back fiercely, beating them one by one, breaking bones and kicking hard. Blood spurted everywhere. The officers screamed for help and collapsed in a heap. Natty stood over them while the other officers panicked, looking for her. Natty woke up in the yard of a damaged trailer. She was gasping for breath and feeling confused and afraid. She could only ask herself, "What's going on?" while trembling and holding her head. Mr. Mark called Jenna to ask about Sylvia, but she wasn't there yet. He gave up, said thank you, and hung up the phone. Alone in his room, he took another drink and walked out slowly, his steps heavy with loss. Mr. Mark went downstairs, calling out as he heard a strange sound. He hesitated to take another drink when suddenly the doorbell rang loudly. Startled, he dropped his glass, which shattered. He rushed to the door and said, "Just a minute." Mr. Mark opened the door and was greeted by his old boss, who said, "Steve, long time no see," with a laugh. His boss immediately continued, "We have a lot to discuss." Behind him, a fully armed SWAT team was standing by. Natty woke up scared in the yard of an old trailer. She was gasping for breath and asking, "What is this?" She curled up in a ball, repeating, "Oh God," then stood at the door and said, "I'm a friend." Finally, she crouched down again and calmed herself, saying, "It's safe. Don't be afraid." While staring into the darkness with teary eyes and asking, "Who are you?" Natty approached the frightened Carla and explained the complicated situation. Natty knew Carla and offered to help her untie her bonds. Carla mentioned a name, and Natty explained that they had been searching for a long time and that Carla was one of them. Carla was shocked, realizing why she had felt incomplete for so long. She had thought it was just her period, but now she understood. Peter tells the story on the plane. The person they captured is the mastermind behind the kidnapping of the girls. Many other scientists are also involved. The team is on their way to O'Hare. Another team is capturing the rest. Since Whisper is dead, they are using conventional methods to obtain information. Tabitha asks when she can talk to Stephen. Peter replies briefly, "Later." The mastermind behind the kidnapping has been caught. Many scientists are involved. The team is on their way to O'Hare. Another team is capturing the rest. Since Whisper is dead, they are using conventional methods. Tabitha asks Peter if he will tell Bellows. Peter forbids it for now, and asks her to assess the situation so that the secret remains safe. After the phone call ends, Jenna comes in and asks who it was. Tabitha says, "Uncle Peter." She tells Jenna to get ready, then stares at the family photo alone, full of hope. Natty approaches a frightened Carla and tells her that the situation is complicated. Natty knows Carla and offers to help her untie her bonds. Carla mentions a name, and Natty explains that they have been searching for a long time and that Carla is part of them. Carla is shocked, realizing why she has felt incomplete for so long. She thought it was just her period, but now she understands. Tabitha asks Peter if he reported it to Bellows. Peter forbids it for now to keep the secret safe. The phone call ends, and Jenna comes in and asks who it was. Tabitha says it was Uncle Peter and tells Jenna to get ready quickly. Natty and her friend bring Sylvia's homework to her house every night, pretending that she will be back. Natty said it was stupid, but they did it anyway so that they wouldn't have to pretend that Sylvia was missing. When they arrived, the door to the house opened by itself. They were shocked and entered slowly while calling out to her. Natty and her friend entered Sylvia's house and immediately panicked when they saw the destroyed room and Sylvia lying unconscious. They checked her pulse and were relieved to find that she was still alive, albeit barely. Natty held Sylvia's hand while they called an ambulance. Natty asked Sylvia to hang on. Natty suddenly woke up in the yard of an old trailer. She was gasping for breath and trembling. She was confused and panicked, asking herself, "What is happening?" The big boss tells Tabitha that there is contact inside the house and hopes that the 3 girls are there. He orders the SWAT team to go in now and make sure everyone is armed with non-lethal weapons. Then, with a satisfied tone, he says, "Go in and get them." Tabitha calls Warren, asking him to help activate the girls' tube room. Warren is surprised for a moment, then immediately agrees and rushes to the room. Tabitha thanks him. The atmosphere is tense but under control. Natty mocks Carla's smelly hand-me-downs from Christina Aguilera. Carla responds casually. Natty says that she wants to wash everything. Suddenly there is silence, and then they hear the sound of armed troops outside. They immediately tense up. Natty goes completely berserk, jumping up and beating the SWAT team to a pulp. Bullets hit heads, bodies were thrown around, blood spattered, bones cracked, and screams filled the air. She beat them one by one until they collapsed in a heap. Her friends could only say, "That was so cool." Seeing that the breaching team has been neutralized, the boss immediately orders the deployment of sleeping gas within 30 seconds. He orders the troops to break open the crate and carry the tubes to the back of the house. Everyone moves quickly. Tabitha calls Warren, asking him to activate the girls' tubes. Warren is surprised for a moment, then immediately agrees and moves quickly. Tabitha thanks him. The atmosphere is tense, but under control. Natty and Carla escape from the SWAT team. Natty complains that it's too crazy just to get a guy's attention. They recall how Carla got there, and then Natty senses more blips to the west. They run in that direction while Natty tries to remember the next step. The boss was furious when he found out his girl was gone in an instant. He yelled and pushed the soldier. He immediately ordered them to pack up the operation and rush west because no one knew how fast she was moving. Meanwhile, Natty jumped off the cliff, screaming with joy. Natty and Carla ran hurriedly. Carla was weak, but Natty calmed her down, saying they had to be ready to fight whoever was waiting for the last girl. Natty was sure the girl was as badly damaged as they were. Natty was tired in class, listening to her friends talk about homework, parties, and gossip. She wondered if she was reading the same story. In the hallway and on the bus, she heard people shouting, "I'm tired, I'm stupid, I give up." In her heart, she was determined to get better and show everyone someday. Natty came home and was greeted by her mother, who told her to do her homework before dinner. At the dinner table, her father says he needs braces. Natty feels like no one pays attention to her anymore. Her mother kisses her goodnight. Alone in her room, Natty stares at the mirror and mutters, "Something has to change." Natty is alone in her dark room, curled up and complaining about bills and the voices disturbing her mind. She asked God to take away the voices because they were driving her crazy. Then she hoped that if Tyler noticed her, he would forget Allison completely. The atmosphere was quiet, sad, and full of despair. Natty lay in the swamp, thinking hard about the haunting meaning of I. She wondered who her mother really was. Then she realized the meaning was much deeper than she had imagined, and that the bluebird seemed to know everything. Natty woke up scared in the old trailer. She gasped for breath and asked, "What's happening?" She curled up, repeating, "Oh God," and then stood at the door saying, "I'm your friend." She crouched down again, trying to calm herself. "It's safe. Don't be afraid," she said. But she stared into the darkness with teary eyes and asked, "Who are you?" Natty wakes up from a nightmare. Her mother comes in, hugs her, and reassures her that it was just a dream. Natty says it felt too real. Her mother convinces her that nothing bad will happen to her and promises to always protect her. He mutters about Team 1, who should already be in position. He hears a strange sound, opens the door fearfully and says, "It's just a kid. Don't be afraid." Finally realizing that her family had been taken, she begins to cry. Natty went on a brutal rampage, mercilessly jumping and beating the SWAT team, kicking, punching, and pushing them until they collapsed in a heap. Blood spattered, bones cracked, and enemies screamed. Her friends could only say, "That was so cool." Natty woke up suddenly in an old trailer. She was gasping for breath and feeling confused and scared. She asked herself, "What's going on?" Natty and Carla hid and watched as the SWAT team approached the house. Natty said she couldn't go down before the enemy arrived. Carla suggested teleporting while holding the target. Natty was hesitant, but she agreed to try. They were ready to find out if it would work. Natty jumped from a tree, carrying the limp Carla, and rushed to the lab. At headquarters, the boss asks when Carla will wake up again. Warren says it will be tonight. The other team is already waiting in the lab. A long corridor is full of glowing purple tubes. A figure in a white robe kneels alone in the darkness. Inside the tubes, girls lie submerged with half-open eyes and bubbles rising slowly. She stands up, touches the glass, and whispers, "Destroyers," with a bitter smile. Natty wakes up with a start in the dark forest, gasping for breath and wondering, "What is this? And what is happening?" She screams softly, her eyes wide with fear, and tears streaming down her face. The boss reported that the girls were going according to plan, and the security team was on their way home. He refused to call in backup boys from overseas, saving them for emergencies. Tabitha asked Peter what Bellows had reported, but Peter told her to keep it a secret for now. After the phone call ended, Jenna came in and asked who it was. Tabitha said, "Uncle Peter," and told her to get ready quickly. The boss accused them of returning to square one without making any progress. Peter said that without new information, there was no reason to continue. The boss suspected that something was being hidden. Tabitha firmly said that everything had been told. The boss decided to retreat temporarily but continue searching for the secret before things got worse. Natty hugs Carla, who is frightened after a nightmare. She tells Carla it's just a dream, calms her down, promises to protect her, and kisses her forehead, assuring her that nothing bad will happen. Selena is confused and asks where she is and who they are. Regina immediately answers that they are sisters who share one body, one mind, and one set of memories. Selena is shocked, but she begins to understand. Regina reassures her that she is not crazy, they are one. Natty happily hugs Carla when she realizes their connection is real. However, she immediately becomes confused about where to find the other three girls. Carla said that she didn't feel like they were outside. Natty was worried that being outside for so long would cause a change, and they wondered what those people had been doing while they were gone. Natty ran away from the SWAT team, thanking the person holding them back. Elsewhere, Melissa went out at night despite her mother's orders not to. She lied and said, "I'm dead." In Hudson, a mysterious girl in a red cloak descended from the roof and confronted people, making sarcastic remarks about thieves. Natty goes on a brutal rampage, kicking, punching, and pushing the SWAT team until they collapse in a heap. Blood spatters, bones crack, and enemies scream. Her friends can only say, "That's so cool." Natty happily hugs Carla when she realizes their connection is real. But she immediately wonders where the other three girls are. Carla says that she doesn't feel like they're outside anymore. Natty worries that their long time outside has changed something. They wonder what those people did while they were gone. The tube is offline and the drainage is almost complete. Carver orders the girls woken up to begin indoctrination. Tabitha asks if there is enough time. Carver replies that, according to information from Psyche, 48 hours is still safe. Warren is skeptical, however, and suggests reconsidering. Natty excitedly hugs Carla when she realizes their connection is real. However, she immediately wonders where to find the other three girls. Carla says that she doesn't feel like they're outside anymore. Natty worries that being outside for so long has changed something. They wonder what those people did while they were gone. Natty was shocked and angry when she saw Tabitha and her group in the tube room. She asked, "What are you doing?" and began to cry. Tabitha ordered the others to run away, saying that she would hold Natty back. Natty responded defiantly, "Is that what you think?" and ordered them to leave immediately. The boss accused them of returning to square one without making any progress. Peter said that without new information, there was no reason to continue. The boss suspected that something was being hidden. Tabitha firmly said that everything had been told. The boss decided to retreat temporarily but continue searching for the secret before things got worse. And 6 and 7, Natty goes on a brutal rampage, jumping and beating the SWAT team to a pulp, kicking, punching, and pushing them until they collapse in a heap. Blood spatters, bones crack, and enemies scream. Peter confronts a terrified Bellows. He tells Bellows that he and Tabitha have decided that he will not survive this crisis. Bellows screams that his project is much bigger than that, but Peter coldly tells him to accept reality. Bellows begs to be killed because he will never be understood. Natty saw the tubes full of girls and realized it would take a long time to free them all. She decided to melt just one so the others would follow. She threw a bottle of purple liquid on the floor, creating a thick fog and buying some extra time. Natty was surprised by how loud the sound was and asked if anyone had noticed. Then, she saw many empty tubes, even though only the 4 of them had been captured. Carla agreed, but Natty immediately asked why there were 5 empty tubes. They began to worry after joining the others in this place. The room instantly became a battlefield. Tabitha ran away in fear, screaming her own name. Peter looked for her in the crowd of soldiers and panicked people, and he panicked too. Finally, they found each other and hugged tightly amidst the chaos. Tabitha said there was another important person in the lab. Peter immediately asked about Bellows, and the answer was cold. Not a problem anymore. This meant that Bellows was no longer a threat somehow. The atmosphere was tense and filled with one big question. What exactly happened in that lab? Who would be the next victim? Amidst the total chaos, Peter held Tabitha's face tightly and shouted, "Listen, you have to take Olivia and get out of here now." Tabitha tried to protest, but Peter was adamant. "I have to do this job," he said. "It'll be easier if I know you two are safe." Tabitha cried softly and finally agreed, saying, "Okay, Peter." Peter pushed her toward the exit, cleared a path through the troops, and shouted, "To the safe house! We'll meet there!" Peter ran back into the lab, fists clenched, ready to face whatever awaited him. Tabitha ran while looking back, Tears fell as she left Peter in that hell. The man was badly beaten. He was kneeling on the blood-stained floor, gasping for breath, but he was still stubborn. He said, "We have no other choice," while enduring excruciating pain. His body shook, and blood dripped profusely from his wounds, but he slowly got up and looked up at the blonde girl raising her hand on the stairs. He grinned cynically and said, "It's not that easy, is it?" Then, in a hoarse, resentful voice, he made the final agreement. "We'll stay here with them, then we'll find the last girl." The atmosphere was dark, and blood was everywhere. This plan felt absolutely terrifying. These two blonde girls were at a crucial moment. One said, "You're right, let's do this." They agreed. There was no other way. Then, in a trembling voice, she said, "She's our mother, the doctor they cloned to create us." I saw it in her mind. Her expression was a mix of anger, sadness, and cynicism. Funny, I don't see any resemblance at all. Finally, they hugged each other tightly on the dark floor as a yellowish-brown energy began to envelop their bodies. "Okay, let's start now, dear." They merged into one, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The blonde girl hugged the limp figure in her lap tightly, covering the person's eyes with her hands. She shouted repeatedly, "Come on, come on!" Her voice trembled with panic. In the corner, a battered man gasping for air could only stare in shock. Blood dripped from his mouth as he muttered, "What the hell is this?" Suddenly, the yellow energy exploded, and the two blonde girls seemed to merge into one. Their bodies floated, and the dazzling light filled the narrow room. The man in the corner stared with wide eyes. Blood still dripped from his mouth, but he seemed to have forgotten to breathe. This moment was brutal and strange. What was happening to them? Why did the yellow energy appear? What would come of this merging? At Water City Hospital, dusk was falling, and the ambulance was still waiting in front of the emergency room. Inside the hospital room, a mother lay weakly with an oxygen tube. Two girls waited beside her. One with black hair sat pensively, and the other with red hair held her mother's hand tightly. Suddenly, the mother murmured softly, "Sylvia." The red-headed girl jumped in surprise. "What?" The mother then opened her eyes wide and screamed, "Sylvia!" as her body rose from the pillow. The two girls immediately panicked and held their mother. The girl with black hair said tremulously, "Something is happening. Sylvia." The atmosphere in the room changed immediately. The monitor beeped faster, the mother became restless, and there was a feeling that Sylvia was connecting from afar. In the hospital room, bathed in orange twilight, the mother suddenly screamed from her bed, "Don't go, Sylvia!" Her body rose halfway to a sitting position, her eyes wide with tears and fear. The two girls beside her, Christy and Jenna, immediately panicked. They held their mother tightly and looked at each other with pale faces. The mother lay back down weakly, breathing heavily and muttering the name Sylvia over and over. Christy asked tremulously, "Jenna, what's going on?" Jenna just shook her head. "I don't know, but this doesn't look good." They hugged Mom from both sides and cried softly while she was still restless, screaming Sylvia's name repeatedly. The atmosphere in the room grew tense. The monitor beeped rapidly. The evening light dimmed. There was a feeling that Sylvia was experiencing something significant elsewhere. The battered man was kneeling on the floor again, blood dripping from his mouth. His hands were raised halfway as he muttered, "Hump!" He was in severe shock. Suddenly, the blonde girl in front of him was surrounded by a dazzling yellow energy. Her body arched, her hair flew, and her mouth opened wide in a long scream of "Oh!" The energy grew stronger and her body floated. Yellow light exploded and filled the room. Electric flashes flew everywhere. She screamed again, "Ooh!" as her body seemed to melt into pure light. The man in the corner could only stare with wide eyes, completely shocked, blood still dripping from his face. This moment was both terrifying and epic. The yellow energy seemed to be transforming her into something new, and the man could only be a silent witness. The room suddenly became an electric battlefield. A row of large, labeled metal tubes was hit by fierce blue-white flashes from all directions, and blinding light filled the room. One tube burst first. Thick white smoke came out. Energy snapped wildly. A long scream of "Ah!" echoed horribly. Other tubes cracked one by one, their lids flying off. Cries of "Ahar" echoed from inside, a mixture of pain, anger, and transformation. Finally, they all exploded together, forming a giant ball of energy in the center. Electric flashes formed a crazy network. The room shook violently, and the screams coalesced into a single wave that sent shivers down the spine. In the hospital room bathed in orange twilight, Mother suddenly screamed loudly from her bed, "Don't go, Sylvia!" Her body rose halfway to a sitting position. Her eyes bulged with tears and fear as a dazzling white light exploded from above, as if something were connected from afar. Christy and Jenna immediately jumped up in shock and held their mother tightly on both sides. Their mother weakly lay back down, breathing heavily, and muttering the name Sylvia over and over. Christy asked tremulously, "Jenna, what's going on?" Jenna just shook her head. "I don't know, but this doesn't look good." They hugged their mother tightly and cried softly while she remained restless, and repeatedly screamed Sylvia's name. The atmosphere in the room became more tense. The monitor beeped rapidly. The twilight dimmed. There was a feeling that Sylvia was experiencing something significant elsewhere. The troops were getting ready in formation. The leader in the black helmet shouted, "Steady, men!" while trying to calm his trembling men. The boss in the black suit stepped forward, raised his hand, and shouted, "Keep your heads together!" But his own face was already pale. Suddenly, a blinding light exploded from the front, and the troops fell into total chaos. People ran and fell, weapons scattered. Some were thrown against the wall like broken dolls. In the middle of the hallway stood an energetic figure, his body surrounded by fire and fierce flashes of electricity. Screams, small explosions, and the hiss of energy all mixed together into pure chaos. The boss was still standing in the middle, but he now realized that things were completely out of control. The troops were in total chaos. The boss in the black suit shouted, "Everyone get up and kill her!" His face was covered in blood, and he was burning with rage. Suddenly, the blonde girl in the middle exploded with power. Red energy tentacles lashed out fiercely, throwing the troops in all directions like broken dolls. Screams and small explosions mixed together. She stood tall, her dark body surrounded by swirling yellow energy. She screamed back, "We can't allow that!" Her eyes glow bright green, and her hair flies wildly. Finally, she stood upright in the middle of the ruins. The troops were scattered about in disarray. The tentacles were still lashing slowly. The boss retreated in fear. Everything exploded in the lab corridor. A dazzling white-yellow light exploded from the center like a newly opened portal to hell. The army and men in black suits were thrown in all directions, crashing into walls, falling flat, and flying high up to the ceiling. Weapons and helmets flew everywhere. At the center of the light stood a blonde girl, her yellow hair flying wildly and her green eyes glowing brightly with anger. Her arms were outstretched, and her body was surrounded by energy that formed wings, or a vicious yellow circle. The troops were thrown like broken dolls. The boss screamed in panic as he flew backward. The girl was now floating slightly, energy swirling around her. Her face was cold and powerful. She was no longer afraid. She was furious and ready to continue. It was late at night and the house seemed quiet. Suddenly it became noisy because the little dog, Arty, was jumping excitedly and shouting, "Yip! Yip! Yip! Yip!" as if welcoming someone he had been waiting for. Olivia appeared at the door, tired but smiling slightly when she saw her dog. She immediately crouched down to hug and pet Arty's head, saying in a longing tone, "Quiet, Arty." She entered the hallway and saw her mother standing in the doorway with a mixture of surprise and relief on her face. "Olivia, are you home?" Olivia hugged her mother tightly, but her voice turned firm. "I need you to pack a bag, okay? We're going on a little trip." Her mother hugged her back tighter, her eyes glistening, and said nothing. In the dark hallway of the house, the blonde girl suddenly asked in a trembling voice, "Are we going down to your lab?" Her friend was surprised and replied, "The lab?" Then she asked worriedly, "Sweetie, there's nothing in the lab. Why would you say that?" The blonde girl stared at her friend with teary eyes. Suddenly, the scene cut to chaos in the lab. She stood in the middle of a destroyed room. Her eyes glowed green, and green energy beams shot wildly in all directions. Troops were thrown around. People in suits flew around in panic. Fire and sparks flew everywhere. Back home, the blonde girl held her head and muttered softly, "I just thought I could hear someone calling me. That's all." Her face looked tired and sad, as if she were trying to convince herself that the voice was just her imagination. However, the lab footage revealed that a strange connection had been made. She was sensing something from afar, and it was both frightening and confusing. In the dark living room, Olivia stood stiffly as her mother hugged her from behind. Her mother whispered, "No one's calling you, Olivia. Now let's get ready to go." Arty jumped excitedly in front of them. "Yip, yip, yip, yip," as if welcoming Olivia home. Olivia crouched down, hugged Arty tightly, and laughed softly. Her mother said, "Don't forget to bring Arty. We wouldn't leave him behind, silly." Olivia picked up Arty, and the dog licked her face excitedly. Her mother stroked Arty's head and said, "Good girl, Arty. Here's a good girl." The three of them stood together in the dim room. A faint yellow light illuminated their faces, which showed a mixture of relief and tension. Arty didn't understand anything. He was just happy Olivia was home, being hugged tightly. But behind this small warmth was a feeling that they were preparing to run away from something big, and that the little trip mentioned earlier was no ordinary vacation. In a dark, luxurious office, two men discussed a big plan. One said with satisfaction, "Your calculations were correct. The next batch has grown 30% faster. They'll be fully mature in a year." The other smiled slightly and said, "Excellent." They continued planning the Houston and Redmond branches. With luck, all facilities will be online by the end of the year. But suddenly the phone rang. He picked it up and said, "We'll continue later. Someone's knocking." The door opened and a woman entered with a tense expression. She immediately reported, "Sir, we have a situation at the San Diego lab." The man immediately became focused and asked coldly, "What kind?" The woman replied tremulously, "We're not sure. We haven't been able to reach them since the alarm sounded." The room, which had been quiet, was now filled with tension. Their big plan was under threat again, and the incident at the San Diego lab sounded terrible. In a dark, secretive office, a man in a black suit sat relaxed as he listened to Sarah's report. When she mentioned the problem at the San Diego lab, he simply raised a finger to his lips and said, "That is unfortunate, but not unexpected." He immediately gave a cold order. "Mobilize a crash team and dispatch them to San Diego. Warn them to approach carefully and avoid contact with any hostiles." Sarah nodded tensely. The man continued walking down the long corridor of the secret facility and said, "If the situation is what I think it is, it may actually turn out to be a good thing." He smiled slightly and said softly, "I've been looking for a justification to seek more funding. May it be so." His tone was full of dark calculation. The incident in San Diego, which should have been a problem, was a golden opportunity for him to ask for more funding. Sarah just followed behind him, her face tense. The atmosphere changed from panic to cold calculation. They were no longer afraid. They were taking advantage of the chaos. In the cold, pipe-filled corridor of the secret facility, the man in the black suit walked leisurely and said to Sarah, "Some executives would focus on the negatives of this situation, but that's how losers think." He smiled cynically and said, "Winners in life always see a way to make the most of even the worst situations." He pointed to a row of large cryo tubes on the wall and ordered coldly, "Have the crash team take along a good supply of cryopods. There are going to be a lot of bodies on the scene, and we don't want to waste all that raw material." His tone was casual yet chilling. He was talking about human corpses as if they were raw materials that would be a shame to waste. Sarah nodded tensely. They stopped in front of a door marked Room 23, with a sign that read, "Absolutely no unauthorized personnel." A red emergency light flashed above the door. The man stared at it with a dark, satisfied expression. The atmosphere changed from cold to terrifying. They were no longer afraid of the chaos in San Diego, but were instead using it for a much bigger, crueler plan. The lab corridor had become a messy graveyard. Thick smoke rose from the cracked floors. Soldiers' bodies lay everywhere. Blood was splattered. Weapons were scattered. The blonde girl stood alone in the middle of the chaos. Her hair was messy, her clothes were torn, and her face was covered in sweat and blood. She crawled slowly at first, her hands trembling and her breath coming in heavy gasps. Then she stood half upright, holding the wall to support her limp body. Her eyes were now focused on the large metal door at the end of the corridor. It was half open, and a faint light shone through the crack. She stared at the door with her green eyes, which were still glowing weakly but sharply. Her lips were tightly closed, and her expression was cold with restrained anger. She didn't say anything, only muttering softly, "Oh!" as if she had just realized how far she had gone. The room was silent after the storm, but it was a chilling silence. She knew she couldn't stop now, the door was waiting, and surely something even bigger lay behind it. The blonde girl stood alone in a long corridor, filled with cryo tubes. Rows of tall tubes lined up on the left and right, with women submerged in purple liquid bubbling slowly inside. She moved forward slowly, her hands trembling as she held her chest. Her eyes widened in shock as she stared at the tubes one by one. Her face showed a mixture of fear, sadness, and rising anger. She grabbed the last tube and stared intently at the figure inside with cold eyes and pent-up rage. Then she pushed the metal door at the end of the corridor. The hinges creaked softly as a faint light from inside slipped out. Her hair fell over her face as she narrowed her eyes into the darkness behind the door. She knew she was on the verge of something big and couldn't back down, even though her body was limp. In Olivia's messy room, her mother hugged her from behind and whispered, "No one's calling you, Olivia. Now let's get ready to go." Arty jumped excitedly in front of them. "Yip, yip, yip, yip," as if welcoming Olivia home. Olivia crouched down and hugged Arty tightly, laughing softly. Her mother said, "Don't forget to bring Arty. We wouldn't leave him behind, silly." Olivia carried Arty. The dog licked her face excitedly. Her mother stroked Arty's head and said, "Good girl, Arty. Here's a good girl." The three of them stand together in the dim room. The faint yellow light illuminates their faces, which show a mixture of relief and tension. Arty didn't understand anything. He was just happy that Olivia was home, hugging him tightly. But behind this small warmth was the feeling that they were preparing to run away from something big, and that tonight would be a very long night. The old man in the black suit was kneeling weakly in front of the blonde girl. Blood dripped from his mouth, yet he still stared at her with cold eyes. He said hoarsely, "You must suspect, Sylvia. You were designed to be a weapon." The girl immediately screamed back angrily, "No, you're lying." Her face was full of explosive anger. The man continued in a cynical tone, "I'm speaking the truth, girl. Think about what you did out there. You could have put them to sleep, teleported them away, or turned their weapons into butterflies." The blonde girl held her head, her eyes half closed. She muttered softly, "It's not true," but she looked shaky. The man smiled bitterly and said, "Your dreams have shown you the way to the truth, little destroyer." The words "little destroyer" were like a final stab. He was calling her by the name she had always feared. The atmosphere between them was extremely tense, filled with pent-up anger, regret, and the truth that was beginning to unfold. The girl was on the verge of an emotional breakdown. She didn't respond immediately. She just stared at the man with eyes that said, "You don't know anything." In the parking lot behind the dark red brick building, Olivia stood, panicking. She stared behind her and muttered repeatedly, "She's coming! She's coming!" Her face was pale with fear. Her mother pulled on her arm, shouting softly, "Please hurry, Olivia." Arty ran ahead of them, yipping, "Yip! Yip!" cheerfully, despite the chaotic situation. They hurriedly got into the pink car. Olivia sat in the driver's seat and looked back through the rearview mirror, her eyes wide. "They're here. I know they're here." Her mother sat next to her, clutching her bag tightly and saying with relief, "Oh, thank God!" Arty jumped into the back seat and licked Olivia's hand. Yip! The car slowly drove out of the parking lot, its headlights shining brightly as the buildings and thick smoke receded behind them. But Olivia still looked back, muttering, "She's here." The atmosphere was extremely tense. They were desperately running away, and she seemed to be very close. In Olivia's messy room, her mother hugged her from behind, crying and saying, "No, please, Olivia, please don't go." Her face was full of tears and despair. Olivia looked at her mother with teary eyes. Her determination was strong. She crouched down, hugged her mother and Arty tightly, and said softly, "Mom, are you ready?" Her mother nodded slowly, rubbing Olivia's hand and saying, "Okay. Okay, Olivia." Arty jumped up and down between them. "Yip! Yip! Yip!" as if to say, "I'm coming too." Olivia carried Arty in the bag, while her mother held her arm tightly. They stood together in front of the half-open door, dim light shining in from outside. Olivia looked ahead with determination. Her mother looked at her child with sadness, yet acceptance. This moment warmed and tightened their hearts at the same time. They were looking for strength in each other before stepping out into the night's darkness. Arty didn't understand anything. He was just happy to be hugged by Olivia. Mom was crying, hugging Arty tightly on the edge of the bed. Tears streamed down her face as she begged, "No, please, Olivia, please don't go." Her face was full of sadness and despair. Olivia looked at her mother with teary eyes. She crouched in front of her, held her shoulders, and said softly, "Mom, are you ready?" Her mother nodded weakly, stroking Olivia's hand and saying, "Okay, okay, Olivia." Arty jumped up and down between them. "Yip, yip!" cheerfully, as if to say, "I'm coming too." Olivia carried Arty in her bag, while her mother held her arm tightly. They stood together in front of the half-open door, dim light shining in from outside. Olivia looked ahead with determination. Her mother looked at her child with sadness, yet acceptance. This moment warmed and tightened their hearts at the same time. They were looking for strength in each other before stepping out into the night's darkness. Arty didn't understand anything. He was just happy to be hugged by Olivia. But beneath this warmth, they felt as if they were running away from something big and terrible. The lab corridor had become a messy graveyard. Thick smoke rose from the cracked floors. Soldiers' bodies lay everywhere. Blood pooled, weapons were scattered. A blonde girl stood alone in the middle of it all. Her hair was messy, her clothes were torn, and her face was covered in sweat and dried blood. She crawled slowly at first, her hands trembling and her breath coming in heavy gasps. Then she stood half upright, holding onto the cracked wall to support her limp body. Her eyes were now focused on the large metal door at the end of the corridor. It was half open, and a faint light came from the crack. She slowly pushed the door, the hinges creaking loudly. Her hair fell over her face as she narrowed her eyes into the darkness behind the door. Her face was cold, and her green eyes glowed weakly but sharply, with anger held deep inside. She didn't say anything. She just stared into the darkness, her expression saying, "This isn't over." The room was silent after the storm, but it was a silence that sent shivers down the spine. He was on the verge of something big and was ready to face it, even alone.